Hey there. I started something new last month in November. Something that I hadn't even planned on doing. I started making sourdough bread. Yes, I took on a new project, and I'm going to tell you why I am hooked on making sourdough bread. I can't stop making it.
English Without Fear, where you can learn to speak English naturally through listening to stories.
Well, what is sourdough bread? Traditional bread uses something called yeast. You might have opened up a little packet or had a jar with some granules, and you mix yeast with some warm water and add the flour, the salt, maybe some oil and some sugar, and you mix it up and you make bread. But sourdough bread uses something called a starter, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. You have to know that I have been making bread for decades. Yes, decades. When I was 16 years old, my mom, who loved French bread, bought a set of cookbooks on French cooking just to find the way to make a traditional loaf, a baguette or a bâtard of French bread, the kind you get in Paris in a bakery, une boulangerie. So at 16, I started making French bread with my hands from scratch and have loved it. But what happened in November was that we had some friends over for lunch, and we were talking, and she, the gal, it was a couple, said that she had been making sourdough bread for about 20 years using the same starter. Okay, so what is a starter? Something you start your bread with. It's something that you have left over from the last batch of starter, the last mixture of starter, and you feed it water and flour, and it wakes up and you create more starter. Then you use some of that awakened, active, bubbly starter to make your current loaf, and you put the remainder in the refrigerator, in the fridge, for the next loaf, either the next day or the next week. I make a loaf once a week. We had stopped eating bread over the last few years just to be healthier. But in September, we went to Italy. We spent 2 weeks in northern Italy, and I had told Michael, we are going to eat the Italian bread because it's good. And we'll just deal with if we gain weight or if we feel puffy or bloated, we'll deal with that when we get home. Well, it did not affect us. We loved the bread. So when I came home and then this couple came over and she talked about starter, I thought, I've got to try that. She gave me some starter, and then eventually I got a different starter from another friend, and I've been experimenting ever since. I have had the worst bread baking failure in my life with sourdough, and I've had some successes, and I'll show you some pictures along the way. It's a involved process, and I would say it's an art, and it takes practice. And I have been taking notes to document what I do, and each time I try again, I add some more information. I am very detailed about the weight of the water, the weight of the flour, and the weight of the starter. I use grams to measure. I have a warm place to keep the bread so it rises, keep the dough as it rises. I have the right utensils. All this since November 2nd when I began. And today I'm recording right before Christmas. I had no idea. There is a whole entire world of sourdough fans who make it. And you can find so many different ways of making it. The second friend who gave me some of her husband's starter sent me videos to watch. It was a Frenchman who was making sourdough bread, and I watched several times and took notes and then typed up my notes and then tried it out and had some failures, and I've been trying, but now I think I have it down. I have not altered the recipe or the way I bake it or prepare it since I've had some successes. Now there's something interesting about sourdough bread and the starter. The leftover starter that's in the fridge for next time is more than enough for the next sourdough try. So what is left over on top of that is called discard. And there are lots of recipes for discard. You don't have to feed it. You don't have to add flour or water to increase the starter. You just take the cold discard, what you're not going to use for the next loaf, and you can combine it with other ingredients from traditional recipes. So what have I made so far? I have made several types of muffins. Muffins are little cakes that take maybe 25 minutes in the oven to bake. I've made apple muffins and pumpkin muffins. And I've made a French bread that is a hybrid. What is a hybrid? A hybrid is a mixture. So it's part starter and then 1 packet of dry yeast. And I just made those 2 loaves of French bread, the bâtard is the shape of it. I just made those my own traditional way of making French bread that I've done for decades. But I followed the proportions, the quantity of flour, salt, starter, water, and yeast. I got that from the recipe, but the rest was just my traditional recipe, and that turned out well. You have to have something called a Dutch oven. It works best. The bread bakes best. And a Dutch oven is a big, heavy pot, or like a ceramic or a cast iron pot with a heavy lid on the top. And with the lid on the top and the dough in there, there's steam and it bakes beautifully. So what do Mike and I do with the bread I bake? We eat it. Yes. Even though we are low carb, high protein food eaters, that's how we eat. We do enjoy a good slice of sourdough bread every day with our lunch. I like the sourdough because it's chewy. You have to chew it. It's chewy. It's so good. We slice it and we toast it ever so lightly to warm it up, and then add just a touch of butter, and it is the best. It is the best. I am finding so much joy in my sourdough hobby. I don't foresee giving this up. Yeah, I spend a lot of money in flour, but it's worth it. And bread is, as they say, the staff of life. Even the Bible talks about bread. Jesus taught us to pray, "Give us this day our daily bread." Well, God is giving us good homemade daily bread. What about you? Do you like bread? Have you ever made bread? Tell me about it. Leave me a comment below this video. And maybe for the new year, you'll start making some bread or some other cooking project. Happy New Year.